Before we continue with articles in Spanish, let's review a little bit about nouns in English. Nouns in Spanish are either masculine or feminine, and that is a weird thing for us English speakers. Well, how about this? We as English speakers are really the weird ones when it comes to comparing European languages, because we are the only speakers to have mostly eliminated this aspect from our language. You heard me right. Old English, spoken over 1,000 years ago, did have masculine and feminine nouns. All of the nouns in Old English had gender. And we didn't get rid of gender for idealistic reasons. According to some linguists, it all had to do with the Vikings that invaded England between 700 and 1000 A.D. The Vikings spoke Old Norse, and they really came to dominate the English for centuries. During this time period, people became increasingly bilingual, speaking both Old Norse and Old English. Many nouns in the two languages had conflicting genders. So some linguists theorize that to dispel these confusions, gender was dropped in English. So maybe English simply got simpler thanks to our friend here. And what do these genders have to do with anything? Well, they make sense for a lot of nouns like boys are masculine and girls are feminine. But trying to understand why tables, knives, and spoons are feminine, but forks, plates, and the bread are masculine really makes no sense to us today. The best answer that I came up in research is that through the early evolution of the language, these genders did make sense to the speakers at that time. Spanish evolved from Latin over 1,500 years ago when the Roman Empire fell. So these genders made sense to people then, and many of them made sense to the Romans thousands of years ago. So, thankfully, with all those years behind it, in Spanish it is pretty easy to figure out the gender of a noun. Usually, nouns that end in A are feminine, and those that end in O are masculine. There are some exceptions, like el problema and la mano. And there are some rules for nouns not ending in A or O, like nouns that end in S-I-O-N, C-I-O-N, D-A-D, T-A-D, and T-U-D are feminine. If you're ever confused about what gender a noun is in Spanish, English to Spanish dictionaries will always specify whether a noun is feminine or masculine. Here are some examples. Here's one example. The Spanish word for bread. If you look all the way to the left, the leftmost circle, you'll see the word in English, bread, and then there's a blue N next to it. N stands for noun. Now, if you look to the red circle that's closest to my head, there you'll see the Spanish word pan. And then you'll see the letters in blue N, M. N for nombre, N for masculine. Well, masculino. And here's another example. I looked up the word in Spanish for table. On the leftmost circle, you'll see the word in English, table, N, in blue for noun. And then the circle closest to me, you see the Spanish word, mesa. And then the blue letters, N for nombre, noun, F for femenina. It's feminine.